Work. And we're live.
Yeah.
Can't see if there's anyone viewing it at the moment yet. Can't. Oh, haven't got any viewers yet. We'll have to wait and see if anyone's logged on.
I'm guessing you can see.
Sorry?
I'm guessing you can see.
I can see. I can see. We've got one person viewing at the moment. Let's see if we can get a few more people before we dive into the conversation. I can see the numbers going up now. We'll let it settle. Thank you, everyone, for coming to see us. Yeah. And how are you today, Alan?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well, Lisa.
Yeah. You've been busy. Oh,
yeah.
Well, oh, hi. There's Kelly saying hi. Say hi if you're there. Got someone already signing in and saying hi. Got a few more viewers coming through now. It's only just 2 o'clock now.
Well, yeah.
I saw one the other day and they had some hold music in the background whilst people were waiting, which was very good. So people were waiting with some nice hold music, which could be enjoyable. Yeah, I've got a few more people coming through now. We'll let that sort of settle. Oh, and there's Joe. Hi, Joe. And Anna Marie. Hello. Give a wave if you're still there. Lots of people on Facebook, which is good to see. We're going to be recording this as well, so if people can't catch it now, they can catch it on the replay. Tony Young. Hello. I've got 5 people viewing. Hi. Any more waves? Any more viewers? Nice to see the technology working. I'll give it more minutes for people to come on board. They might pop in the middle of it anyway as well, which is good. Right, so today we're talking about COVID, being COVID secure. For those who don't know me already, I'm Lisa. I'm founder of the Wentworth Collective. We're an event management consultancy. We specialise in putting exceptional experiences for organisations. And the heartbeat really of our organisation is our collective, the exceptional people who we work with to help deliver amazing events for our clients. And I devised collective thinking, the past few weeks, because it came to me as we were in lockdown that it was actually through the collective and the people who we work with, who we're all helping and working together to help us move out of lockdown and move out of this crisis. And together we are stronger. One of the people who I've been working for many, many years is Alan Law. Alan Law is a leading event management expert, and he's always there behind the scenes when I'm running events for my clients with our teams, helping us make sure that our events are safe and secure. And in this new climate, one of the first people who I spoke to was Alan to discuss COVID-19 and what this means in respect to health and safety. And we discussed putting this on board. This is going to be a very, very positive conversation. It's about us moving forward in a positive light, as I said to Alan in the past few weeks, still keeping the magic alive with events. That's so important, but making sure that we've ticked the boxes, made sure that we're safe and secure and moving forward. So we've allowed for about an hour. There'll be Q&A, putting your questions in the boxes. I can see that the streaming's working, which is fantastic. And feel free to put in your comments and your questions and I'll pose them to Alan. But before we do, we're going to cover, events that, when they're going to go live, the current landscape, what Alan's been working on, and give you some hints and tips to help you and your organisations. So before we kick off, Alan, let's start how your career began in live events and focusing on event safety in particular.
Thanks, Lisa, and hello to everyone on the call. Lovely that you could join us. My health and safety career, event safety career, commenced when I was working with Earls Court and Olympia. I'm sure some of you might remember Earls Court before they knocked it down. And at that time, venues weren't really taking safety terribly seriously, although health and safety legislation has been around since 1974 in the UK. But the venue did experience a number of very unpleasant accidents, two which were fatal. And the board of directors decided to take safety a bit more seriously. And I was asked to assume responsibility for health and safety management across the two venues. So that's where my introduction into health and safety came from. I progressed over a period of time, representing the board in the subsequent prosecutions that followed the accidents. I then, after 7.5 years with the venues, decided to move on. I worked with a large safety consultancy called Simons. My time there, this is how long I've been doing it. I wrote the venue safety management plans and the risk assessments for the Athens Olympic Games. Bless them, not that the Greeks ever read any of it, but I did write them. I then, 15 years or so ago, set up my own consultancy, work on all sorts of events, really, from the BAFTAs to the Isle of Wight Festival. I was the principal consultant on the opening and closing ceremony of the Olympic Games, also with the torch relay. Interesting area of experiences there with LOCOG. We always very concerned, LOCOG, with their reputational risk of anything going wrong, and I think that's something that we can apply to the current situation we're in. The serious implications of the damage of not managing COVID-19 properly, the damage you could do to our reputation as an organisation or company. Work on a lot of corporate events. Work with big companies like Google, for example, IBM. BP Castrol, just to mention a few, to give you sort of a flavour of what we do. A fair bit of training, as Lisa, you know, a little bit of lecturing. I've lectured on various event management degree courses at Birmingham, Glasgow, and indeed with City University. So that's kind of me, really.
Yeah, and I've got to say, the training that you do is absolutely exceptional. You really feel empowered once you've had the training, and it's not such a scary subject. A lot of it is common sense, and we're going to talk about that a lot in the talk today. So we do have a lot to cover. Got quite a few questions to ask, but I'm going to kick off straight away. We certainly know that the landscape is changing on a daily basis. Even in the time that we've been prepping for this Q&A, Alan, we've seen, even from yesterday, it's been changing. But the first question I'm going to ask is, when do you think we're going to be able to deliver live events within the UK?
Well, Lisa, good question. I mean, live events are actually happening as we speak. We discussed earlier, I was involved with the Peter Crouch TV event, which we'll come back to. I've got bookings for live events as early as October of this year. I've got an activation for a leading alcohol brand, hoping to go live at the end of July. Several virtual events with speakers and presenters and so on and so forth we've done in the last 2 weeks for IBM and Google. So yeah, it's already moving. So we're already doing live events. And
what are they doing? I mean, how are they able to do that? If we take the Peter Crouch example, and I mean, from what we were saying, that was in full lockdown. What are they doing to ensure that they're COVID secure and COVID ready?
Well, I think what's happened, there's been an absence of any solid UK government guidance on events, but there has been a number of guidance notes issued for other sectors. And what we used as a benchmark was the construction guidance. We applied the controls that were recommended in that guidance to the build and de-rig of the Peter Crouch TV programme in West London studios. And we were able to qualify why it was safe to deliver that event based on government guidance in another sector, which was almost identical to ours. And that's what we've tended to have to do in recent weeks, is taking what's been put out by government for other sectors and look at the similarities and parallels with our sector and then apply the controls.
So that's interesting, really. So what we're doing is we're looking at other industries, seeing how they're getting back to business, for example, construction, and then using, I suppose, their guidance to then bring that into our industry to then make a plan moving forward.
Absolutely, Lisa. That's exactly what we've been doing.
Yeah.
I mentioned to you earlier, I've been doing a lot of work in the wedding sector, which you can imagine they've been hit extremely badly by lockdown. And once again, no guidance for the wedding sector whatsoever. So we've looked at what's out there for recent HSE guidance on office working. We've applied. There has been a little bit of retail guidance that we can apply as well. And as I mentioned earlier on, the AA, I believe it, the Automobile Association has produced some excellent guidance for hotels and accommodation, all very pragmatic, nothing too prescriptive, all extremely applicable.
Right. Yeah. And because, I mean, what can we learn then from these industries? You know, they're leading the way. What can we learn from them? What have they been doing? Or even in the small time, you know, we were saying with the Peter Crouch program, how that was in full lockdown, it's changed now. What can we learn from what they have been doing, you know, to help us moving forward?
What could we learn? I think we could, well, through applying their controls, we can learn we can proceed at a level with live events. And we need to keep abreast of the changes in government stance, the guidelines, so that we can develop the event industry on at the same pace as other sectors are developing and moving on. I mean, I use the example of construction a lot because construction in a lot of cases didn't even close down. They continued right the way through lockdown with no change to the commercial element of their work activity.
Oh, that's interesting. And we were talking before as well, because, you know, it's all very well, we're talking about September, it's a long way away, and how we can be ready. Certainly something that we've been discussing is that we have to be prepared, and something that we can learn. I know that you're working with some other industries at the moment who they haven't necessarily got a date for when they're going to be running an event, but they are making sure that they are ready and that they're prepared to be able to run those events. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Very much so. I think the message really is don't wait till we get the green light and then start planning, because you'll have lost a quarter easily. Make sure you've got everything in place, your procedures, your documentation, you've had your discussions, you've agreed what level of social distancing you're going to implement prior to deciding, right, we need to go live. I think a good example of this is the work I've done with a large alcohol brand who have an activation all set to go live, which is a public activation, a lot of interaction involving obviously the sale and supply of alcohol and live music. They don't quite know when it will be appropriate to go ahead. They're planning to go ahead, start delivering at the end of July. However, they're wanting to have everything in place, their documentation, all procedures in place, ready well in advance, so that when they feel reputationally it's acceptable to go ahead, they can move straight forward with it. Interesting how they switched their role. This activation was designed to tour festivals this summer season, and clearly because festivals aren't going to happen, you know, the Glastonbury circuit, they've now reviewed where they're taking this to another sector. So rather than have all this huge amount of money that's spent on these assets, which are basically mobile bars and DJ booths, they've redirected that activation to another area, which they realise will be alive. So there's a level of flexibility and agility that I think that they're applying, which I think the events industry is extremely good at. We're very good at that. Yeah,
we are, and we're creative, and we're forward thinking, we're proactive. And so from what you're telling me and what I'm hearing, I suppose to recap for the audience as well, we need to be prepared. Best practice will be to start making plans now. And from what you're saying, should we wait for a green light to put these plans in place? Are we empowered to put these plans in place ourselves? Is there a guidance, or is it common sense?
Oh, absolutely. We shouldn't wait. We should start now. Many agencies I'm working with are starting now, and clients are starting now, because to put some context on it, you look internationally, Disney World in Orlando is opening in the middle of next month. They've got their first live event. I believe it's July 14th. If you want to go on their website, you'll see when that is. There's international movement that will impact on the UK. The Messers in Germany, they're all open. The Ryan Amsterdam is open. So we're going to start seeing the bigger venues in the UK opening, I would suggest, certainly by September. Talking to the CEO of Excel recently, He wouldn't be prescriptive about the date, but he was talking in and around early autumn for their first large event. So we're not that far away, particularly in the context of planning the event.
Right.
So we're not that far away from, and obviously there will be huge availability in these venues for fairly obvious reasons. So we need to be ready to say, book the venue and deliver the event at fairly short notice.
So there's two things that are springing to mind here. I think there's one, which is we need to be COVID secure. We need to be ready. I think from an agency perspective, from a client perspective, they're going to be looking to agencies themselves to get ready. So I want to explore that and unpack that a little bit, but also venues as well. So I think if we start with the venues, what can venues do to support us in making sure and give us confidence that they're ready?
Well, I think I don't know if anybody's seen what the NEC produced in Birmingham, but I think venues will be proactive. They will offer a menu, if you will, of options for event organisers going into their venues of things that procedures that can be adopted. This will include provisions for social distancing, food service, hygiene, all of these areas, which they will all be enhanced from what their offer had been in the past.
Yeah.
So I think, the first point, I think if you're looking at an event from a venue perspective, see what they've got in place. And it's very apparent that venues are being fairly proactive on putting across what they are doing. And they, once again, are benchmarking other venues, whether it be UK or international venues. There's been a lot of guidance flying about from larger venues, international guidance, but some of which I've shared with you, Lisa. Yeah. It's valuable advice. But bear in mind, we're not working particularly with legislation. We're working with advice and guidance, and it's down to us to interpret it as we see fit, as we see appropriate, as we think our clients will find it acceptable.
Yeah, and I'm receiving a lot of information at the moment from venues, but also in consultation with venues as well, who are coming to me saying, well, what do we need to do? And I think we've spoken about that customer journey from the moment they step foot into a venue and that contact they're going to have along the way. You actually have to map it out, to think, are they going to be touching food? Are they touching a door? I think we spoke before about the AA, about luggage as well.
The AA guidance was very interesting. It's worth a read because it's the first bit of guidance I've seen that's been specifically directed at hotels, but totally transferable to events.
Yeah.
And it's, as I say, practical, pragmatic, and no huge cost implications.
Yeah. So then we've spoken about the venues. Talk me through about control. When we spoke about the word control measures, and we do that anyway with a standard health and safety program that we do anyway for events, is that we put a control measure. And something that I always remember you taught me, Alan, was you can't remove risk. You can only, minimize it and show where there's a risk and put a control measure in place to reduce that risk. What's an example of a control measure? What could we be advising our clients they need to be more mindful about?
Any number of things. I think it's interesting. I mean, a lot of it does go back to social distancing. I think what we've got to be able to demonstrate to our clients, and indeed the delegates, the visitors, the guests, that we have put in reasonable provisions for social distancing. We've got to inspire a level of confidence that we have got regular cleaning regimes in place. These probably need to be more visible. Historically, we've always kept the cleaners back of house because it's not something a delegate wants to see. I think, and this is a conversation I've had with the wedding venues, we need a more visible cleaning regime to restore and maintain confidence. I've always been a believer, whatever event you're delivering, people vote with their feet. And if you can't inspire enough confidence, we can build a venue and we can put all the technical infrastructure in place. But if we don't have a delegate, we don't have a visitor, we don't have an event. So we have to be able to demonstrate to the visitor delegate that we are taking the risk seriously, that we have got control measures in place that are reasonable. And we can talk about that in a bit more detail if you want, Lisa. But I'm thinking around the whole thought. I read a document recently that was talking about a thermal imaging system that had an alarm system on it. So when your delegate walked into the venue, an alarm went off. I mean, my goodness. Can you imagine what would happen? It just doesn't even bear thinking about. Or another document I read that said all delegates and indeed everybody, event staff, should be wearing a mask. really, I mean, the HSE really are questioning the value of masks, as you probably know, in the transmission risk. So it's that sort of thing that we need to really, or those areas we really need to drill down into and ensure what we're putting in place is proportionate to the risk.
Yes, yes. And I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, we have to keep the magic alive. We need to make, and we discussed this before, about people feeling comfortable. And I think putting the measures in place will make people have confidence in the event, and that you've looked through everything, you've looked through the risks, and that you're making your delegates feel psychologically safe, and you've chosen a specific venue, you've put all the measures in place. And I know that we've spoken about, pre-event communication as well. We've spoken about track and trace. I mean, what are your thoughts about track and trace?
I must be honest, I'm a little bit reluctant to embrace track and trace. I think there's some very large issues with it, which I'm sure many of the audience are wholly aware of. I think when we look at the most vulnerable group in society, they are probably the least likely to hold a smartphone, i.e. people over the age of 70. I know that's a generalization. It's obviously a voluntary system. I can see a whole sectors, particularly self-employed people, not wanting to engage with the process. I was asked by a wedding venue this morning what would happen if they delivered a wedding and they had the track and trace organization contact them and say they'd had somebody that contracted the virus. Would they then have to close down for 72 hours? There's many unanswered questions here. As we've discussed, Lisa, my personal opinion, we are going to get to consensual social distancing in the very near future. And what I mean by that is people will make their own decisions based on their own assessment of the risk, as indeed we do in every other area of our lives. We will decide whether we have a medical condition or we're shielding or whatever we might decide, which will allow us to make the decision whether we want to go to the event or not. I think what we have to do as event organizers and venues is to give them the confidence that we have considered all of these options and all these areas, and we have measurable and sizable control measures in place to afford them some level of, as I say, confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've spoken about like practical things. I know when we were talking about the Peter Crouch example, giving yourself enough time, because that was something that I remember you telling me about in terms of thinking about your team behind the scenes as well in your plan. So if we, just to recap, you're going to put your plan in place, you're going to put the control measures in place, but in terms of planning, you're going to have to make sure you stagger arrivals for the, putting up your events, or even for the breakdown as well. So it's about staggering, giving yourself enough time. And we have that now to really map out that event and show that you've covered everything, but also protecting your teams and the staff at the hotel as a venue as well. Yes,
yeah, absolutely. And the other area that we discussed, Lisa, was succession management. That's always been it's always something we've considered, but it's something we need to consider probably in more detail. What happens if the event lead or a presenter, a speaker, a key technician contracts the virus? What level of succession management have we in place? Have we already worked out somebody almost standing by, fully briefed on the event or the services, the event services, to step into that individual shoes? And it was something we had to put in place for the Peter Crouch show. I was my colleague was actually delivered the on-site safety role, but I was on the sort of the standby man. I was on the substitutes bench. So I was had a daily briefing at the end of each day, so I could, if she couldn't contract the virus, I could step in the following morning and pick up where she left off seamlessly. And I think that's something we need to be mindful of in our event planning, more so, put it this way, than we have done in the past. Anyway.
Yeah. And I think it's the other thing that we've been discussing as well, and giving people practical tips. We have our normal risk assessment, but now we need to have a COVID-19 risk assessment.
Well, the HSE now says it's a legal requirement. If you're sending people back to work, you have to have a COVID-19 risk assessment in place, and you've also had to shown your employees, your staff, that document, so that they're aware of what control measures you've got in place. Not too dissimilar from any risk assessment, to be frank, but they're making they're certainly making it a headliner as opposed to all the other areas of safety that you would normally share with your staff.
Yeah, and also there's we discussed before. There's a I think I've got it here if I share my screen. the guidance from the HSE. Would it be worthwhile me sharing that now?
I think it's probably worthwhile because this is just recent. The HSE released this about 2 weeks ago, and it's appearing in all the guides. Just so everyone knows, what the HSE is doing is issuing a series of specific guidance on each sector. So far, we've had construction, we've had offices and contact centres, we've had retail, we've had transport, and I'm hoping in the near future we'll have something around restaurants and bars, which I know we can apply in our sector. Whether we ever get something on events, I think we're probably there's probably sectors that will take priority over our sector, but we can cherry pick what I often call the nuggets from the guides that's provided to other sectors. But this has been sent out to every sector. So
do you want to just talk me through this, Alan? We've got 5 steps to safer working together, just for, you know. But
in essence, this is a poster that the HSE say that all companies returning their staff back to work need to display in a prominent staff office area, and it's entitled 5 Steps to Safer Working Together. So first point, we have carried out a COVID-19 risk assessment and shared the results with the people who work here. The second point, we have cleaning, hand washing and hygiene procedures in line with guidance. Third point, we have taken all reasonable steps to help people work from home. We'll come back to that point, Lisa, because it's an area of discussion. Fourth point, we have taken all reasonable steps to maintain a 2-meter distance in the workplace. Once again, the 2-meter rule is a moving feast. It could well be a meter by the next week or so, 2 weeks. And finally, where practical, finally, where people cannot be 2 meters apart, we have done everything practical to manage the transmission of risk. And then it's signed at the bottom by the employer, and then you've also got a quote who to go to for further health and safety advice. So not too onerous, reasonably pragmatic, I think. But gives you an indication of the expectations of the HSE or local government of us as organisers.
And it's pretty straightforward and self-explanatory. And I think just for people who are watching, if you're interested and you can contact me afterwards, I'll be able to send you very plain English guide to how you can prepare yourself. And I think this is where Alan's brilliant, because what he does is he distills all these numerous documents and we work together to put them in plain English and essentially not scare us or our teams and just make us feel empowered. And we've been working together on a document about how we can prepare ourselves pre-event, during the event and post-event in very few lines. But I think people will really like it to see, actually, we can deliver live events and still have that magic that we love. And make our participants feel safe, which is really, really important. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here now. There we go. Social distancing. We've been talking a little bit about that. What are your thoughts on social distancing, Alan?
Well, these can I say, Lisa, are very much my thoughts. As I said earlier, social distancing is too blunt an instrument, in my opinion, to apply to most events. On a call this morning with a wedding organisation I work with, Hostology, and they canvassed 1,400 brides and grooms and asked them what their thoughts were on social distancing. And without exception, they came back with, we would not be interested in booking a wedding with you if we had to apply social distancing protocols. So I think we need to proceed with caution. The word I use, reasonable, and that's taken from, it's used numerous times in health and safety legislation. We need to put in reasonable measures for social distancing. It needs to be proportionate. What we can't do, Lisa, is we cannot design spaces that do not facilitate reasonable social distancing, i.e. jam a whole load of people into a reception area, i.e. jam a whole load of people into an activation area. Maybe consider the social elements as well, which we'll discuss a bit more, I think, in the conversations. So that's what I feel very much, that we're going to come to a point where social distancing, as I said earlier, will become consensual. It's in all the documents I'm producing, I make it very clear that my client has made every effort to facilitate reasonable social distancing. However, it is self-regulatory. We can only put the provisions in. What the delegates, visitors, guests do with those provisions, we have no control over. To be sort of blunt, we can't walk around with a 2-meter stick and start saying, sorry, you're all too close to one another. It's neither reasonable nor delegate facing, nor is it our role. We're not enforcement officers here. We're really
I think you gave a good example. We caught up last week how when you're on site, everyone kept 2 meters apart until you got a plan in place, and then suddenly everyone was poring over this document to look at the plan. It's just not practical, really.
Human behaviours. We can't. We can try, but with certain elements, we just won't try. I won't stop.
Exactly. So, just to recap, that we're halfway through. It's planning, timing, responsibility, using common sense, communication, and we're talking very much about live events. What else do we need to consider? I know that we've spoken recently, we're seeing a lot of online events in a very positive way. It's the new way of working. I'm getting, already this week, we've had lots of inquiries for online, but working in tandem, hybrid events, working in tandem with in-person events as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, probably like you, Lisa, we've been involved with 2 hybrid events, one for Google, one for IBM last week. And this is where studios were used. There was a full show caller, producer, technical staff, full day's rehearsal. Then the following day, speakers arrived and the presentation was delivered and broadcast. So we're already doing that. I think then, to use the expression that's terribly overworked at the moment, to use the new normal, I think any event we deliver will have to have a virtual element to it. Undoubtedly, I think we'll all agree there's no substitute to the face-to-face event. There never will be, because that human interaction is so important. But I think the virtual side of it will take carry far more importance. No longer will we just send a PowerPoint presentation as to the event that happened. I think there will be a parallel virtual event which will enable people who can't attend the meeting, the conference, whatever it might be, for very valid reasons, and often COVID-related reasons, to actually fully engage with the event. The technology clearly exists. It's not an issue. But what we've never done is put that level of importance on it. And as I said, I think it'll get to the point, and this is once again my opinion, I stress that much the way when the DDA, the Disabilities and Discriminations Act, came in a number of years ago, we were forced to take on board people with mobility issues and making provisions for them, and indeed hearing issues and sight issues and all those sort of issues. We will be expected to also have a provision in place for somebody who, for possibly COVID-related reasons, cannot attend the event. And this could be somebody that was planning to come the day before and was rang up by a track and trace organization and told to isolate for 14 days, but they still wanted to come to the event. They still wanted to engage with it. And it has to be a real, I believe, a live engagement. So it's a different approach, I suppose, than we've seen in the past.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
The other thing I think we discussed, because of this, I think we need to make our events more visually engaging. A man in a grey suit standing in front of a screen probably isn't as engaging as they need to be. I think we need to look at, and you mentioned one of your clients saying 3 hours is as long a session as you can ever do or deliver, and I think that's very true. I think they need to be shorter. I think that the business content needs to be looked at very closely and more focused in the content, so to keep it as relevant and as effective, if you will, as possible, particularly if you were looking or watching or engaging the event from a virtual platform. Yeah.
When I spoke to my team, this week about it, we were likening presentations to TED Talks, and how you have to make sure that they're engaging. People's attention spans are diminishing as, we're talking about Zoom fatigue, but we need to make sure that they're engaging as well. But we need to make sure there is a place for online, because this is the way of the world now. People are going to be having online events and hybrid events. There's a solution there for people to have both. And I think to embrace it positively, because I think you can reach a far wider audience through putting your events online as well. So you're absolutely right, taking that into consideration. We also touched upon GDPR as well in terms of our planning, and in terms of making sure that that's covered in terms of information and how we gather that information as well. What are your thoughts on that?
From what I've read, you apply the same protocols as far as you can. It's a bit of a minefield, as we know, GDPR, particularly with the track and trace protocols or applications. But I think we just have to apply the legislation as we've always done, and reassure the delegate client base that we will respect their confidentiality, their personal data. I don't think we can do much more than that, really. But the thing about track and trace, as I mentioned earlier, it is voluntarily. It's when there's been some thoughts about, linking your registration to an event with a track and trace type of element, and I think it's an area I think we need to be careful of, an avenue we need to be careful of going down. It's a little bit like taking people's temperature as they walk into the venue. I always say, don't ask a question unless you're very sure of the answer.
Yeah,
you're happy to deal with the answer you're going to get, and I think that's an area I'd be once again cautious with.
Yeah. So we need to put the the measures in place. We need to make people feel secure. How can we, and we've discussed this before about not waiting for the green light from the government. How can we collectively support each other? What would be your sort of nuggets for advice to keep moving?
I think we carry on. We proactively look at what our event schedule going forward for the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months. We start penciling in when we'd like to do events, what format we think they can take, what element of the sort of hybrid side we can embrace. Look at the content. This is a sort of stage you need to be looking at content well out before you deliver the event. Look at, as I say, a more visual element to it. Look at your programming. If you could already open dialogues with various venues with regards to availability, COVID protocols that they may have in place. One thing that's very clear, different countries are adopting different protocols, different levels of control. I think it's very much keeping abreast of it. As I said, the extraordinary thing is how quickly this is moving, and that nobody's an expert in this, Lisa. I often describe myself as the one-eyed man in the kingdom of the blind. Yeah. There are no experts. I read recently somebody saying, we will send a COVID-19 expert assessor into your venue. And I thought, I'd love to meet that individual. I think the other thing to mention is this isn't going to go away, Lisa. COVID most certainly will morph into or mutate into another virus. And we'll be dealing with this again next year and the year after and the year after. So what we have to identify the control measures that will carry us through the next virus that we're going to be hit with, because absolutely we are going to get one. And I think what we've learned from this was, particularly the UK's government's approach to it, is you've got to be prepared in advance to manage the situation. Also, I think with globalization, we're going to see more of these viruses. Okay, they seem on the face of it to all come out of China. Although I read yesterday, most of the UK virus came from France and Italy, I believe. Anyway, it's a new normal. So we need these are just not, we're not putting sticking plasters over a short-term problem. This is a change of working going forward, and I think that's very, very important to address.
No, absolutely. And I think that's where we're here to help, because, we're working together. We've got the risk assessments, and already, even since we've been talking about this, the risk assessments that we've put in place and the control measures, that's changing. So the document is ever changing, and the control measures are changing. So it's about getting started and getting your plan in place now so that you're prepared when you do need to be nimble, like you were saying before, and adjust. That's really, really important as well. And I think we mentioned about venues. So what should we be asking our venues? We mentioned about the document from the AEO and the AEV, which is the Association of Event Organisers. They're there to support us.
Yes, indeed. Well, that document, it's been a long time coming, but I'm reliably told we're going to get sight of it next week. And obviously, I'll share that with you, Lisa, as soon as I get eyes on. And hopefully that will give us some more concrete guidance as to how the big venues are planning to tackle the problem. But it's I think the very first thing we have to do is inspire confidence with our clients and our delegates in that we are taking the issue seriously, and we've got measures in place that will enable us or enable them to attend what the government now calls a COVID secure event.
Exactly, and show examples of how it's been done with the past, like the examples you've been telling us. We're probably gonna, we've got about, I know people have got busy, short for time, and probably about 10 to 15 minutes left. If anyone's got any questions they want to ask Alan, do put them in the comments, and we can ask Alan about them straight away, because as I say, he's exceptionally knowledgeable, and we will be able to share after this talk our document, which shows how people can be prepared in advance, of their event taking place. Just a quick fire one. What would be your, you mentioned before, what would be your top three then? Taking away people coming away from here, what would be the top three things they should do after this, Q&A?
What should they do? First off, look at every event they plan to deliver and examine what control measures they could put in place for social distancing, hygiene, as in cleaning regimes. They're the two key areas. What measures they could put in place reasonably that would be acceptable to the visitors to their event. Look at also the hybrid opportunities. That would be very, very, in my opinion, very a primary consideration. And put it in a way, in a package that was acceptable to who they were delivering the message to. And what I mean by that, don't send them a 60-page document, please, because people don't read them, as we all know. Make your recommendations, your suggestions, your control measures short, brief, and impactful. Also, make them consultative. In the wedding venues, one thing that all the venues keep asking: how many people can we have at our event? How many people? When are the government going to tell us how many? That's not going to happen. So it's more about saying to your end delegate client, how many people do you want to get into the venue? And what format do you want it to take? And then we'll look at what the venue's got in place and how we can deliver this safely. Because, as you know, Lisa, I've always been of the view 99% of the things we want to do, we can do safely, as long as we consider them properly and we have the documentation in place to back it up.
Exactly.
And what I hope, talking about risk assessment, what I hope we'll get to a point, at the moment I'm writing standalone COVID assessments, what I'm hoping in the near future, it will just become one part of your bigger risk assessment. In the same way we look at food hygiene, we look at allergies, we look at working safely, the build and the breakdown. COVID-19 or the management of the next virus that come along will just be another area, another risk that's assessed within your documentation. Yeah.
Got one question that's come in. I'm just going to show it up on here. There's been a lot of talk of testing visitors before festivals check they're COVID-free so the event can go ahead. How likely do you think that is?
I'm guessing you're referring to the Melvin Benn document that Festival Republic produced. The problem with the testing area is it's what you do with that information. You can test somebody, and this was something we looked at with a Peter Crouch event. A test only tells you that you've got it now. It doesn't tell you when you've been carrying it around for the previous 7 days. So it's once again an area that I don't think as organisers we want to go down. We might have, like a lot of the events I've done recently, you have a safety or a health declaration where your delegates, and it's all based on trust, like all of these things are, do declare that they haven't had the virus, or they don't have the virus, they haven't mixed with anybody that has the virus. But I think that's about as far as you can go, really.
Yeah. And we spoke.
Coming back to that point, Lisa, I don't think it's our place as event organisers to put this. It's the government has its own track and trace system in place, and I think that'll exist wherever we work in Europe. I think that's sort of outside of our remit. Yeah,
and it's about what you were saying before about being, consensual. What information people want to share, and making people feel comfortable about sharing that information as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, you're into that whole GDPR scenario, which the government has a certain level of exemption, we don't, and it's It's very, very tricky. So, if you've got a track and trace, the question, so your second day of your event, and it transpires that somebody has contracted the virus, where do you go from there? And you're on a 3-day event, for example. It raises more questions than it answers, I think, within our sector anyway.
Yeah, I hope that answers your question, Ali. Okay, so just if anyone hasn't got any more questions, we'll sort of wrap up, and just with a quick quick fire round. Just in the spirit of collective thinking, what would, or unless there's anything else that you want to add, sorry, Alan, I think
that's it. I think
we've spoken about, us, working together, and together we're stronger. Just in the spirit of the Q&A that I've been asking all my guests, what does collective thinking mean to you?
Collective thinking. I think it's consultation. It's shared experiences, shared knowledge, shared expertise, and it's benchmarking other sectors for good practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we can really learn. That's one thing we can really learn from other industries.
Absolutely. And we often think we're the only sector having these problems. We absolutely aren't. I mean, I was wholly unaware of the wedding sector until I got involved with it, and the horrendous time they're having of it, particularly with regard to insurance companies, insurance claims. That's a minefield what's going on in that sector with regard to that. So, there's lots of shared experiences.
Yeah, I agree. What have you missed? What's the first thing? What have you missed of life outside of lockdown, and what's the first thing you're going to do when normal life resumes?
Go and have a beer in my local pub, I suppose. I think that would be nice.
Yeah, very, very nice. And is there a particular favourite do you listen to podcasts? Is there a favourite podcast that you're listening to at the moment?
I do tend to listen to the Radio 4 podcasts.
Right.
And there's been some very interesting ones, especially surrounding COVID-19. Some very interesting alternative scientific opinions.
Oh, really?
Which I found very helpful in giving you a more balanced view of some of the advice that the media are pushing forward, as opposed to a more level scientific advice.
Brilliant. Is there an episode in particular to share with the viewers? Or
not one that springs to mind, because I've listened to so many, because obviously it's so relevant to our sector. There is so much information out there, but I do find, as I say, the Radio 4 podcasts are very good.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Alan. I really, really appreciate your time, and I always enjoy working with you. In terms of people finding out more information or how we can help them, I think we discussed the best thing is to
talk to you, Lisa.
To me, and I'm working with Alan, and we're putting together a guide, and we'll be able to help you, and also we'll keep you updated. I'm sure we might have to have another one of these in a few months' time, because the situation is just changing all the time. It's been changing in the past week, even past 4 weeks since we've been discussing this. So if you've got any more comments, do post them after here. This is going to be for those people that are watching it on replay. Thank you very much, and do send in your comments as well. And there will be some post Q&A information I can send. You can just send me your email details, and I can send that to you. So thank you very much, Alan. I really, really appreciate it, and I shall speak to you soon.
Indeed. I just want to share with you something a client said to me recently. It'll be all right in the end, and if it's not all right, it's not the end. Which sounds sort of potted wisdom, but I think it's very true of our circumstance.
Yes, yes, thank you. And I think that's a good point to end on. Thank you, Alan.
Bye-bye.
Bye.